The world breathed a sigh of relief after the Nuremberg Trials. But no one asked, where did the rest disappear to? Tens of thousands of Nazis escaped. Some to Argentina, some to monasteries, and some straight into the offices of the new authorities. Today, you will learn what happened to those who were not shown at the main trial. Who was right next to Hitler and managed to stay in the shadows. Why Nuremberg wasn't selected by accident. And what happened to those who made it to the scaffold. This is not just a story about a trial. It's a story about how humanity saw itself for the first time without a mask. You are on the Mr. Markin channel. So, was Nuremberg the symbol or purification? After World War II, many of those responsible for the Holocaust were not executed at all. Some escaped, some were secretly protected, and some took high positions in the new governments of various countries. Next, we will talk about the mass escape of the Nazis. How did it happen? Where did they flee to? You will get a closer look at the main defendants. And here is SS Obersturmbannführer Adolf Eichmann, head of the Jewish Affairs Department of the Reich Security Main Office. He organized the deportation of Jews to the Auschwitz concentration camp in German-occupied Poland during the Holocaust. In 1945, after Nazi Germany fell, Eichmann fled to Argentina under a false name. There, he lived as an ordinary immigrant, working in a factory and trying not to attract attention. But he was caught by Nazi hunters. In 1960, Israeli intelligence agency Mossad tracked Eichmann down in Buenos Aires. He was kidnapped and secretly taken to Israel. In Israel, he was taken into custody and put on trial in one of the most famous trials in history. During the trial, Eichmann fully admitted that he had participated in the deportations, but tried to justify himself by saying, "I was just following orders." On May 31st, 1962, the sentence was carried out. He was hanged, and his ashes were scattered at sea after the execution to prevent the creation of a memorial or place of worship. Historical background. As for the situation within the Soviet Union between 1941 and 1954, more than 333,000 people were convicted of collaboration and ties to the Nazis. However, it should be noted that many of these convictions concerned individuals who had no real connection to the Nazi regime. And Stalin's regime was also extremely cruel to people who were wrongfully convicted, many of whom were subsequently rehabilitated in modern historical period. Next, I will tell you about the sentences and behavior of other Reich leaders on the scaffold. In Nuremberg, the whole world was waiting for monsters. But when the defendants spoke, we saw people with families, habits, excuses. And that turned out to be the most frightening thing of all. We are doing this project together with you. Your support in the form of likes and subscriptions gives us strength and inspiration. I'm grateful for every comment and opinion. The main trial was over. The Nazi leaders had been convicted, and the world breathed a sigh of relief. Justice had prevailed. But in reality, this was only the tip of the iceberg. Outside the courtroom, there were thousands of people who had built the system of terror, millions of signatures and orders, millions of glances, millions of those who stayed silent and supportive. Let's get down to the more detailed story about the 12 unknown Nuremberg Trials. While millions were shouting, "My Führer," thousands of people lost their families, homes, and lives. Behind the stone walls of the concentration camps, a nightmare that they had no idea about was unfolding. Today, we are getting back to those who created that system and those who remained its victims forever. Those are the 12 unknown Nuremberg Trials. And this is really little known information. Almost no one mentions it. During the 12 subsequent Nuremberg Trials, held from 1946 to 1949, an additional 177 defendants were convicted. I briefly mentioned above the total number of defendants in all the trials. According to the information of the Nuremberg Trials Museum, of these, 24 people were sentenced to death. 20 people were given life sentences. 98 people were sentenced to long prison terms. 25 people were acquitted. A part of the convicts was released in the 1950s under an amnesty, and by 1957, almost all of them were released. What were they tried for? For roughly the same things as the main defendants in the first trial. But the scale of their crimes was no longer industrial. Some of the defendants personally had overseen deportations from occupied countries, had supervised the organization of forced labor camps, and had signed orders for the secret arrests of resistance fighters. For example, one of the defendants had overseen the deportation of thousands of people from France and Belgium to camps in the east, where many had died of starvation, cold, and violence. These actions had had direct and tragic consequences for thousands of specific individuals, and it was for them that the defendants were tried for. Overall, the court considered the system of crimes organized and supported by the defendants: mass deportations, deprivation of civil rights, participation in the destruction of Jewish communities, creation of concentration camps, abuse and murder of civilians. It was this chain of actions, their conscious participation in the structure of terror, that the defendants were given the sentences for death sentences, life sentences, and long prison terms. The world saw that responsibility for crimes against humanity cannot remain abstract. Outside the courtroom, there were those who had built the system of terror together with the leaders of the Reich, those who had turned a blind eye, those who had remained silent. There were many of them, millions. The overwhelming majority of German citizens had supported Hitler's regime. They were the ones who had raised their arms in the Nazi salute in the squares, and they were the ones who had shouted, "My Führer!" And now they look at the framed portraits of their sons on the wall, and do not even know in which forests and swamps they lie in eternal silence. Their cities had been ruined, and now they themselves were forced to bury the prisoners of concentration camps with their bare hands, about whom they said, "We didn't know." But what was left for the society that had raised its arms in the squares, for the millions of German citizens who had agreed with and had supported this regime? Millions of ordinary people also suffered, not from court sentences, but from ruined lives, ruined cities, fear and loss. Imagine a woman sitting in the apartment without heating in a partially ruined building, with a portrait of her son, husband, or brother still hanging on the wall. She is a grain of sand in the ocean of suffering left by the Third Reich behind. And it was in those people, among the ruins and destroyed lives, that the price of everything the defendants had done was reflected. Let's talk about the rest of them. Why weren't they all tried? The war was over. Hitler was dead. The Reich's leadership had disappeared. But thousands of others remained alive. They walked the streets, smiled, started new families, built houses, started businesses, and the world turned a blind eye to it. Today, we will look into the shadows of history, where the stories of those who escaped justice and those who lost everything forever continue. The main figures, Hitler, Himmler, Goebbels, escaped trial, most likely by committing suicide. Even decades later, Hitler's disappearance remains shrouded in mystery. Every year, new films and investigations appear that cast doubt on the official version. Could it have been a carefully planned hoax? What we know for sure is that thousands of Nazis quietly left for Latin America, found work, and started new lives. Can it be called justice when so many Nazi criminals safely disappeared into the post-war world? And here's who helped them. The Vatican, through Alois Goodall's commission, issued false documents, and the Red Cross issued passports that allowed Nazis to leave Europe. In Argentina, the president and his wife, Juan Perón and Eva Perón, opened their doors to fugitives, providing them with security, false passports, jobs, and a new life. In Chile, Catholic priests Ernst Lehmann and Karl Rocha helped people hide and emigrate, using their connections with the Vatican. And the names of those who went into hiding: Adolf Eichmann in Argentina, captured in 1960, Joseph Mengele, Angel of Death in Brazil, Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon in Bolivia. If the escape networks were built so carefully and deliberately, who was responsible for their escape? A question for history and for us today. Now let's look at the defendants. How did the defendants behave in the court? They enter the hall. There is silence. Cameras capture every glance. Goering smiles. Keitel tightens his fists. Ribbentrop denies everything. At first glance, they appear to be ordinary people, but beneath their familiar features, cold and calculating evil lies. Today, we will look straight in their eyes to see what shocked the entire world. Ernst Kaltenbrunner. Quote, "I did not know about the mass murders. It is not my responsibility." A tall, reserved man, Kaltenbrunner was one of the most frightening people at the trial. He did not cry out in defense. His face was pale, and his answers were dry, almost bureaucratic. There was no remorse in his eyes, but cold alienation. He tried to appear reasonable, but the transcripts reveal his shock and attempts to shift responsibility onto the system. Julius Streicher, quote, "I was just following tradition. My publications did not incite violence." As publisher of the newspaper Der Stürmer, the main mean of Nazi propaganda promoting hatred and violence, Streicher did not ask for mercy. He argued, joked, and tried to turn the trial into a farce. He repeated anti-Semitic passages, referred to tradition, contested the charges in the court, and showed no remorse. His behavior, arrogant and offensive, only confirmed the charges of inciting hatred. Hermann Goering, quote, "I always followed orders. I simply obeyed the law and did what the state told me to do." Goering was one of the most colorful and controversial figures at the trial. He displayed arrogance, tried to manipulate the court, but ultimately committed suicide. His behavior combined confidence and despair, which made his image even more complex and multifaceted. I will mention a few more key names that appeared at the main Nuremberg trial. This will undoubtedly help convey the atmosphere of that time straight from the courtroom. Here is Martin Bormann, a bureaucrat loyal to Hitler, father of 10 children who loved gardening. As the head of the party office, he signed orders that contributed to the deportation and persecution of Jews, including their resettlement from France to Eastern Europe, where many fell victim to Nazi policy. Wilhelm Keitel was a disciplined man who had dreamed of becoming a farmer, a married man, and a caring father. In December 1941, he signed the Night and Fog Order, which allowed secret arrests and deportations in the occupied territories, and as a result, many people were placed under the supervision of the Nazi authorities and disappeared without a trace. Joachim von Ribbentrop was a lover of luxury and sports, a businessman in Canada, married to the daughter of a champagne producer. As foreign minister, he signed diplomatic agreements with Hungary and Romania on the extradition of Jews, who then got into the hands of the Nazi authorities and were subjected to resettlement and forced labor. These portraits show small joys and human habits, but behind them monstrous crimes lie. And of course, Nuremberg is no purification. It is the symbol. We punish the leaders. A new word in history. It was here in Nuremberg that the world first heard the words that changed history: crimes against humanity. The trial showed that ordinary human faces can hide incredible evil, and that bureaucracy, loyalty to ideology, and personal interests can turn everyday people into perpetrators of monstrous crimes. There was also a sensation: Yevgeny Krasnushkin, a psychiatrist who conducted psychological tests for sanity on almost all Nazi criminals held in Nuremberg prison, using the power of logic and personal charisma, managed to obtain a confession from one of the high-ranking bosses of the Nazi regime, Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy in the party. Hess confessed to him that he was completely sane, remembered everything, and pretended to be crazy. This shocked not only the American psychiatrists, who also had conducted tests on him, but also his Nazi comrades, who had no doubt about Hess's insanity. The trial exposed the true nature of the state system built in Germany, all the mechanisms that set the monstrous machine of human extermination in motion. And the world saw not just individual crimes. It saw the path that the state and society as a whole had been following. Gradually, it was a chain of steps. First, dehumanization. Then, the replacement of laws, bureaucracy, propaganda, and finally, the normalization of violence. And for the first time, humanity faced figures and facts of an astonishing scope. Millions of lives systematically and coldly wiped out, like an accounting report. And when the witnesses in court realized this, they broke out in a cold sweat, not only from the crimes they had seen, but from the realization that the familiar world could turn into such a huge machine of destruction that humanity had never known before. So, what shook the world so much? And can a person remain the same when he looks into the eyes of the real hell? The screen shows shots of the camps, scenes that make viewers faint, emotionally unbearable video footage. Crying and whispering are heard in the courtroom. Some people are struggling to hold back their emotions. The witnesses could not look away from the screen. For the first time, the world faced the horrors of ideology at its extreme. That was not abstract evil or dry figures from textbooks. The participants in the trial saw the real, meaningful consequences of the complete distortion of the value of human life. Millions of people had become the subjects of cruel experiments and inhuman treatment, and life itself had been devalued to the point of absurdity. People saw the faces of the defendants, heard their cold explanations, and realized how morality can be distorted. The shadows of triumph. The towers rise toward the sky as if guarding the secrets of a bygone era. The squares are empty, but you can still hear the rhythm of thousands of voices that once enthusiastically supported the government. Today, another act begins here. The fight against what people believed to be everlasting, but turned out not to be. In this city, history takes a turn that is impossible to forget. So, why Nuremberg? How did the city of mass celebrations and triumphs of the Third Reich become the main courtroom of humanity? Nuremberg is a city of narrow cobbled streets, medieval towers, and beautiful old houses, where every square breathes history. But it was here that one of the most terrible manifestations of the 20th century originated: Nazism. The ideology of Nazi terror was built among stained glass windows and facades. The beauty of the city became the background for the bureaucracy of a murder, for the mechanisms that destroyed millions. The contrast between its splendor and horror is more striking than any words can describe. It's not just geography, where thousands of voices once shouted Nazi slogans. Nazi ideology has now been brought to an end. In May 1945, there was debate. Berlin, Leipzig, Luxembourg. The USSR demanded that the trial be held in the capital of the Reich. But it was here, in the American zone, and as we know, Germany was divided between the Allies into controlled zones. after massive bombing of cities, that the Palace of Justice had miraculously survived. A courtroom and a prison under one roof. There was even an underground passageway that allowed the defendants to be brought to the courtroom directly from the prison cells where they were held. The trial lasted 11 months. Symbolically, the city of Nazi Party congresses was now the city of a trial. This is no coincidence. Nuremberg had been the heart of Nazism. Thousands of flags had been raised there, and Hitler had dreamed of a new Rome, the eternal center of the Reich. Ideology had become a religion, and people had become cogs in a machine. And it was there that the world forced those in power to face up to their responsibilities. Imagine, where hymns and marching steps once resounded, now a verdict was pronounced. The city of triumphs became the city of judgment. And it was more than a trial. It was an appeal to the very heart of darkness, and its transformation into a symbol of justice. That is why Nuremberg. Because only there could it be shown that the ideology that had promised 1,000 years of power ended in a single courtroom. A courtroom that in 1945 became the main courtroom of humanity for several years to come. How they were executed. They enter one after another, face after face. Some are calm, some are trembling, some are angry. Everyone knows that this is the end. And it is now that their true character is revealed, before the words, before the excuses, before the last breath. After the court had announced its verdict, 12 defendants were sentenced to death by hanging. The execution took place on the night of October 16, 1946, in Nuremberg prison. Hermann Goering, Chief Marshal of the Luftwaffe, one of the main organizers of Nazi power and mass murders. They did not manage to hang him. A few hours before the execution, he had taken cyanide poison in his cell. It is still unknown how and who had managed to supply him with the poison. Joachim von Ribbentrop, Minister of Foreign Affairs, he had signed agreements on the extradition of Jews. He entered the room calmly, standing straight, without visible fear, his hands down. When asked by the executioner, he confirmed his name, Joachim von Ribbentrop. He was behaving in a disciplined manner, but showing signs of nervous tension. His hands were sometimes trembling slightly. Before the hood was put on, he uttered his last words, "I am dying for my fatherland and for the honor of Germany." Julius Streicher, publisher and propagandist, known for his anti-Semitic publications. He entered the hall impetuously, with an expression of rage, his face red, his steps quick. When asked by the executioner, he confirmed his name, Julius Streicher. Before the hood was placed around his neck, he shouted and blasphemed, "Heil! Heil my people! I am dying as a German." Streicher was showing no fear. On the contrary, he looked aggressive and defiant. His hands were trembling, but he made no attempt to resist. Ernst Kaltenbrunner. He entered the room calmly, but visibly tense, his face pale. When asked by the executioner, he confirmed his name, Ernst Kaltenbrunner. Before putting on the execution hood, he uttered his last words, "I accept my fate. May God guide the people." He behaved with restraint and was not trying to resist. Each step is like a separate beat of a metronome. Each breath seems to slow down the time. The light from the lamps falls on their faces, their hands, their slightly trembling fingers, and it seems that you can see every fold of skin, every glance, every muscle tensing in front of the unknown. There are no spectators, no court, no loud words, only movement, rhythm, breath, and shadows stretching across the walls of the prison cell. Only facts, steps forward, eyes looking down, a pause before the hood put on. And in these moments, between steps and silence, the space around seems to be shrinking. Every sound, the rustle of clothing, the creak of the floor, becomes more important than any words. And again a step, and again a pause. and the next name, Hans Frank. Governor General of occupied Poland, he had signed orders for deportations and executions. He entered the room with an expression of complete inner concentration, with a calm face and his hands down. When asked by the executioner, he confirmed his name, Hans Frank. Before his execution, he uttered his last words, reflecting religious repentance. I am repenting before God and asking for forgiveness. He behaved calmly, made no sudden movements, and was not trying to resist. Wilhelm Frick, Reich, Minister of the Interior, he had participated in laws on racial purity and deportations. He entered the room calmly, but with noticeable tension, his face slightly pale. When asked by the executioner, he confirmed his name, Wilhelm Frick. Unlike some of the other condemned, he did not say any prayers or make any official speeches. Before putting on the execution hood, he looked focused and held his breath. Alfred Rosenberg, the party ideologist, developer of anti-Semitic laws and the New Order in the occupied countries. Rosenberg was the fifth in line after Kaltenbrunner. He entered calmly, with his head bowed. His hands were not trembling. When the executioner asked his name, he said quietly, Alfred Rosenberg, and not a word more. He said nothing before his death. He did not cry out, did not appeal to God, Germany, or the court. He was standing motionless, without resistance. His face showed fatigue, but not fear. Wilhelm Keitel, chief strategist of the German General Staff. He had signed the night and fog orders. Keitel was second in line after Ribbentrop. He entered the room with his back straight, marching in step as if on parade. His face was pale, but his expression was firm. There was not the slightest sign of confusion. When his name was read out, he said loudly, Wilhelm Keitel. Before putting on the execution hood, he said calmly and clearly, I appeal to Almighty God. May He save my people from new misfortune and grant me mercy. After that, he said quietly, I followed the orders of my Führer and served my fatherland to the end. Alfred Jodl, Commander-in-Chief of the Wehrmacht, he had participated in operations against the civilian population. He entered the courtroom with a firm military bearing, his back straight and his step confident. He remained calm and reserved. Witnesses noted that Jodl looked more like an officer going to carry out an order than a convicted man. When asked his name, he replied loudly, Alfred Jodl. Before putting on his execution hood, he turned to those present and uttered his last words. I salute you, my Germany. He then added, I am appealing to God. Fritz Sauckel, Commissioner for Labor Mobilization, organizer of the mass deportation of slaves to work in Germany. He walked in steadily, but slowly, his face pale. When the executioner asked his name, he said clearly, before the noose was put around his neck, he shouted, I am dying innocent. My Führer, may God preserve Germany. Arthur Seyss-Inquart, the last of those executed on the night of October 15th to 16th, 1946, in Nuremberg. Reich, Commissioner of the occupied Netherlands. When he entered the hall, he was limping slightly. He had a leg injury from World War I. When asked by the executioner, he confirmed his name. His last words were, I hope that this execution will be the last act of the tragedy of World War II, and that the lessons of the war and this trial will serve the world and mutual understanding between nations. After these words, he turned to the priest, nodded slightly, then said to the executioner, I am ready. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Subscribe to the channel, and in a week you will see a new episode. Nazi princesses, love, luxury, and terrifying secrets.